Peter is the Philosophy and Humanities Department Chair at Southwestern College, where he has taught for almost 30 years. After Peter speaks, we will be joined by Velocity to get us out of our chairs and do a little bit of movement. And now, please welcome Peter Bolland.
Hi, my name is Peter Bolland, and I'm a professor of philosophy and humanities at Southwestern College. And it's always a great pleasure for me to come into the San Diego Oasis community and just bring what I do on campus into the off-campus world, like today, where I get to think about philosophy with you and aging and how we've all managed to make it through these last 18 months. So I think about philosophy a lot, especially during the summer. I'm not teaching at school. And you know, philosophy has a bad reputation. It's often thought of as tedious and elitist and irrelevant. And because I've been teaching philosophy to college students for 30 years, believe me, I know exactly what that feels like. And those charges aren't entirely wrong. But I want to think through today with you about how maybe we can imagine philosophy a little more personally, a little more relevantly, and make it matter in our lives. So philosophy literally means the love of wisdom. Philos and Sophia, the love of wisdom. And isn't that a universal human longing to want to come out of confusion and into clarity, to want to come out of fragmentation and alienation and into wholeness and into wellness? So regardless of what culture you're from or what century you're from, that seems to me to be a fundamental human need, as real as the need for food and water, the need to know, the need to understand. And wisdom means the art of living well. It's a little bit different than knowledge, isn't it? The art of living well. And who doesn't want that, right? Who doesn't want to have a richer, more fulfilling life? And so it seems to me philosophy is integral to human happiness and to helping all of us navigate the different phases and stages of our life. You know, wisdom is not gained by amassing a lot of knowledge. And wisdom is not something you know, it's something you are. It's something you do. Wisdom is not, in the end, really about information. It's about transformation. And to me, that's what's so exciting about bringing these ideas as best I can to life, whether it's at Oasis or anywhere else. Because in the end, I think wisdom is ultimately about awakening from the dream of separateness, of alienation, of fragmentation, and awakening into wholeness, wellness, and dare I say it, happiness. So does any of that sound tedious or elitist or irrelevant? It seems like the opposite of all of those things. I can't think of anything more exciting, more inclusive, or more relevant than a communal process by which we all learn how to shed our sadness and transform our suffering into wisdom through the practice of philosophy. And what does it mean to practice philosophy? What does it mean to live the philosophic life? Well, I'll tell you what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean having any particular college degree. It's not something you can only get at a university. In fact, in the end, it might not have much to do with that at all. It's a lot closer to the bone. It's a lot more available to all of us than you might think it is. Philosophy is not the passive absorption of someone else's ideas. It's an activity. So let's practice the activity right here, right now. And you already have all the tools you need because you think and you see and you feel and you have a wealth of lifetime experiences from which to draw into the laboratory where we test truth claims. You know, when you study biology, there's a lecture and then you go to the lab and you do the lab work. But in philosophy, your life is the laboratory in which you test the veracity of truth claims. You know, do they pass muster? Is this really true or is this not true? And you keep, all of us do this, we keep checking against against the authority of our own experience to test whether any truth claim has merit or not. Isn't that what we're all always doing? And philosophy is simply the conscious practice of that activity in a deliberate, intentional way. So this is especially relevant for those of us who've lived a few years, for those of us with more life behind us than in front of us. I have a birthday coming up in a few days here, and don't we always sort of think more about that kind of thing when another year cycles around, that I've been alive this long and I know I don't have that much left in front of me. And you and I have all weathered a lot of storms personally and been through a lot of amazing experiences. We've lost a lot of friends along the way. This last year, 18 months, has been a global disaster. And all of these experiences then come into the mill and get ground up into what I hope can become food that we can use to nourish this philosophic practice, this philosophic quest. So here's one idea I want to bring into our thinking today. Here's one idea I want to think through with you today. The idea of philosophy as therapy, as a healing modality. We see this idea already way, way, way back in the time of Plato, 4th century BC Athens. We see Socrates describing the methods of philosophy, critical thinking, asking questions, discerning truth from lies, through evidence-based rational discourse and unflinching self-examination, all of that as a means of therapeia. And therapeia is where we get the word therapy, and it just in plain English means healing. And I think that's an energy that's kind of lost in a lot of academic philosophy, where you're often kind of beaten down with this idea that philosophy is an academic, intellectual, analytical, logical process of, arguing about the definitions of words. But what I'm suggesting here today with you is that let's set that aside and let's experiment with this possibility that the ancient Greeks already were experimenting with, that the reason we wrestle with each other about competing truth claims and the reason we live so urgently in these questions is because we want healing. We want healing for our psyches. That's another Greek word, right? The psyche. It usually means things like soul or mind, or maybe a more modern word might be consciousness. Or in Hinduism, we might say the mind body, put them back together. To heal the broken places. Philosophy is not just about knowing a bunch of stuff so you can do better on Jeopardy. Philosophy is about healing the broken places in ourselves, in the people we love around us, and in the wider world. That's that idea from Hinduism about dharma, about purpose. Or in Judaism, the Hebrew phrase, tikkun olam, the idea that it is our purpose to participate in the healing of the world. And all you have to do is open your eyes and see how deep the world is in need of healing at every level. And it is our human purpose to step into that need and take whatever tools and talents we may have been given and wield those as weapons in that fight. And so we don't do philosophy just for ourselves. There's also this sense of we want to have clarity and wisdom so that we can play a richer role in the community as a positive force. And this is a theme found throughout the world's wisdom traditions, like I just referenced a couple of them there. This is a universal longing again, to come out of my own private pain and to become part of my community's transformation into its ideal, or at least more ideal than it is right now. Now, here's another window through which we can look into this house. In a lot of ways, we live today in the age of psychology. for about the last 100 years or so, going back to around 1900, Freud and James and later Adler and Jung and all those folks, that's when the Western science of psychology was sort of built. This really liberating idea that came out of medical practice, right? That we could study the mind, we could study behavior, and we could maybe help people grow into wholeness out of their neurosis or even psychosis. And that is a really powerful modality of healing, isn't it? A lot of people, me included, have availed themselves of psychoanalysis or therapy. And I don't want to put philosophy against psychology in some sort of false contest. That's not what I want to do at all. I'm just noticing with you that we live in the age of psychology where almost every human challenge is defined as a mental health challenge. And maybe there's a pill we can take to adjust the chemistry of our brain. Maybe there's a talk therapy modality that can help us transform our thinking and our behavior. And all those things are great. But it's worth noting that before 1900, for tens of thousands of years, human beings have done it differently, right? When they had suffering from their own disintegration, they would go see the village shaman, the seer, the sage, the priestess, the elder. And that person would ask them questions, challenge their current mode of thinking, maybe take them on a vision quest. This is how human beings brought themselves out of disintegration and into integration for millennia before psychotherapy came along. And maybe it was through rituals, maybe it was through a sacrifice, maybe it was through some painful transformation that you would come out the other end with a new way of seeing the world, with a new way of being in the world. There's an old Greek word for that, metanoia. Metanoia means literally new thinking. And it's the word that the Greek authors of the New Testament sort of put in Jesus' mouth, right? When he says, you must be born again or born from above. Now, we don't have to think of it in religious terms. It just makes just as much sense in a secular setting. But the idea is really powerful that our old ways of thinking aren't serving us anymore. We need a new way of seeing and being in the world. And all over the world, philosophy, religion, spirituality, what I call wisdom traditions, have sought to facilitate that transformation. The same thing that today we go to our shrink for. And I think it's time to recover that ancient notion of philosophy as a healing modality. Haven't we learned through the long years of our life, and haven't we especially learned during this long and difficult year and a half that we just weathered, that there is an urgency to these questions about how am I going to show up in my own life? How am I going to show up in the lives of the people around me at work, in my family, and all of my relationships? And as we reflect and think intersectionally about how our suffering and our loneliness and our creativity and our fear and our joy and our love all kind of work together, all against the backdrop of a world that sometimes seems to have gone completely mad, what remains? What wells up? What rings true? And remember, this whole project of trying to live the philosophic life, trying to live intentionally, curiously, deliberately, honestly, whatever insights emerge are going to well up from within you. Truth doesn't come secondhand from other people. Teachers and books and talks and all that stuff are really important, but they're all just maps. You have to walk the walk yourself. And we inspire each other certainly to take those steps, but you have to walk the steps yourself. And this love of wisdom, this longing for wholeness, it's a universal human longing. It's transcultural, transtemporal. everyone is included in this human struggle to come out of ignorance and into freedom and into wisdom. So I have a few suggestions or a few insights that seem to have welled up as I've been reflecting on these things. I just want to trot them out, not as I've got the answers kind of a thing, but as here are some ideas you can test against the lens of your own experience in the laboratory of your own life and see for yourself if these ideas have any merit. I know that's how Buddha often taught. He would say, you know, don't follow me. Simply be lamps unto yourselves. And I've always been struck by that advice. It seems like really good advice. So here's an idea that I've been noticing more and more lately, and see if this rings true for you. And ideas like this always sound cliche and kind of vanilla at first, but we're going to go deeper in a second. Things change. Everything is impermanent. Again, like the Buddha said, all forms come into being and all forms go out of being. The Sanskrit word is anitya, impermanence. That's one of the fundamental truths about there being a world at all, that all forms come into being and go out of being. And so wisdom then means learning to accept change. In fact, more than accept, which is sort of a passive thing, to celebrate change, to say yes to the beginnings of things and to say yes to the ends of things with gratitude. That the end of something is the birth of something else. And this is something we all observe all around us and experience in ourselves again and again. And wisdom means, instead of resisting that change, allowing it, practicing allowance and acceptance. And here's why. Because as we practice that kind of deep acceptance, we feel our teeth unclench. We feel our heart begin to open up like a flower. We feel a kind of softness and peace well up in us. There's your pragmatic proof. There's your evidence that an idea like that has validity. It has merit. It has pragmatic value. It makes a difference. And you're less pained and more free when you begin to learn how to practice acceptance of change. And hasn't this year especially taught us again and again the wisdom of that? And there's another even deeper layer. The wisdom of accepting impermanence means letting the reality of impermanence drive you into the beauty and wonder of this present moment. Because there isn't anything else. You know, the past doesn't exist. The past is just a lot of thoughts, memories, right? I have tons of memories, you have tons of memories, but all of those memories are thoughts that occur in this now moment. There's no such place as the past. And the future has even less reality than that, right? Because it hasn't even happened yet. The future is also just a bunch of thoughts that I'm having in this now moment, mostly worries or escapist, egotistical fantasies about how I want stuff to work out. And we spend most of our life dwelling in the past, dwelling in the future, and what a shame to get to one's deathbed and to realize that I was never really here at all. And so wouldn't that be wisdom to allow the truth of impermanence to drive us into the beauty and sort of the extraordinary ordinariness of this now moment? The Japanese Buddhist word for it is tathata, T-A-T-H-A-T-A, tathata. It's the perfection of this present moment. Even though it's completely ordinary and in some ways banal, but it's miraculous because this is where eternity is, in the present moment. So once you start accepting impermanence and following that inquiry deeper, it opens up some pretty transformative ideas that actually show up in our lives as wellness, as the ability to let go. So one of the things that we also realize when we sort of reflect on and meditate on impermanence is, and we've known this intellectually all along, none of us really owns any of this. Our language tricks us, my house, my wife, my job, my car. Those are linguistic tricks that suggest possession. But as soon as you die, all of your property instantly becomes somebody else's property. We never owned any of it. It was all kind of an illusion. It's like theater. And to bring that awareness again into this present moment drives me to gratitude that I get to live in this house, or I get to be in this relationship with my wife, or I get to do this work that I love for a little while. So the fact that I know that it's impermanent drives me into a deeper and more lived appreciation of it. And isn't that what wisdom looks like? To be more alive here and now. And I think what also happens when you accept impermanence is you no longer feel the need to control everything. You start to let go. And you accept current conditions as they are. That's a very stoic, and lots of wisdom traditions counsel us to do that. Try and focus on the difference between the things you can't control and the things you can control. And the things you can't control, like other people or the traffic or the weather, stop worrying about all that stuff. Focus on where you do have influence. Your own thoughts. Your own emotional weather system, the words you say, the actions you take. That's where your power is. And to stop stressing and worrying about what other people are doing. That is another step toward increasing freedom. And as our freedom increases, our joy begins to rise up. Again, you can feel this in your own gut when you go through these processes. And I think getting older for me, and I bet for many of you, also means just letting go of our sense of importance. I was talking to some of my women friends the other day, all in their 60s, and they were saying, you know what happens when you get into your 60s? You become invisible. And I know a lot of you are nodding. You just sort of disappear from the workplace. You disappear from social gatherings. No one pays much attention to you anymore. And there's a good and bad side to that. The bad side of that is it kind of hurts your feelings to no longer be the center of attention. But the good side of it is you're no longer the center of attention. You get to sneak around a little bit. You're freed from that constant, gaze of everybody always checking you out to see how you fit into their preconceptions. Being older means being able to slip a little more undetected around the edges of things. And I don't know, I think that's kind of cool, and I think that's kind of desirable, and actually one of the unexpected pleasures of getting older. There's a freedom in aging that I think a lot of young people just simply don't understand. I mean, how could they, right? You don't know about it until you get there. A lot of younger people see aging as a kind of pitiable condition for which there is no cure. They see it as a loss, or they see it as an increasing decrepitude. And I certainly did when I was young. But now that we're here going through it, there are treasures here that we didn't see. It's almost like those of us that are aging, you can feel, let me use the river analogy, you can feel the riverbed kind of widening. When you're young, the canyon channels are kind of narrow and the water is racing and it's getting a lot done and it's knocking stuff down, it's conquering, it's achieving, it's experiencing all kinds of things in a rush. And then when you get older, it's like the valley walls start to open out a little bit and the water slows down and it becomes more still and there's less waves. And in that stillness, we see more. We feel more. I feel that so much in my own life now, that my emotions are a lot closer to the surface than they ever used to be when I had to kind of keep it in control. Now I don't care. I cry at the movies all the time. Why not? And that freedom is really liberating. Again, you can feel yourself kind of releasing and letting go of all of that, control. And here's another insight, just one last piece here. Here's another little insight that wells up through the cracks of our own lives, that we're starting to let go of, I'm just going to say it, the arrogance of youth. I know I was certainly that way. That need to know everything about everything. And as I grow older, less and less do I feel the need to rush in and correct people or explain everything about everything. We learn humility. Why? Because I've been wrong so many times. Just dead wrong. And I love this lifelong learning that we do here at Oasis, because it continually reminds me that I know almost nothing. And that's the real powerful, liberating force of lifelong education, to come into deepening humility. And with humility comes a sense of freedom, of playfulness, of non-judgment. And suddenly all the other people around us are not rivals or adversaries. They're just imperfect people like us, muddling through our lives as best they can. And that ancient Socratic idea of wisdom as emptying out, wisdom as not knowing, wisdom as the absence of false opinions or false beliefs. And the three most powerful words in philosophy that Socrates taught us were, I don't know. I'm reminded of the great words of Bertrand Russell, who wrote in 1933, as he was watching from England the rise of Nazism in Germany. He wrote, the fundamental cause of the trouble in the modern world today is that the stupid are cocksure while the intelligent are full of doubt. And do those words not ring clear, perhaps clearer today? And I'm going to flip it into a positive thing, that one of the hallmarks of intelligence or wisdom or wellness or whatever word you want to use, one of the hallmarks of the philosophic life is that you are comfortable with ambiguity, comfortable with ambivalence, comfortable with not knowing. Because you're done with the egoic game of having to be right about everything. You'd rather touch down on something real. And reality is nuanced, it's paradoxical, it's mysterious, it changes its face quickly, as if the sun were popping in and out from behind a cloud. How do you keep up with that? Not with dogmatic, concrete certitude, but with a kind of fluidity that comes with the flow of having lived a long time and being worn in a little bit. And so we also finally need the community. Buddha called it the Sangha, the connection we get from one another. And that's what's so beautiful about Oasis too, to come into a space, whether digitally or physically, and challenge each other's point of views and practice listening and practice humility and learn about how reality looks through the lens of other people's understanding. This is a priceless educational experience that it's hard to get at home by yourself just reading a book, because you're stuck in your own, conceptions of things. We need each other to get home. That's the philosophic life, right? Going home to wholeness. Like Ram Dass always used to say, we're all just walking each other home. And that wonderful line from that poem by Rumi, that out beyond all ideas of right doing and wrong doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. And when the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Coming to you today on a beautiful June day, and whenever it's June, I'm out of school, right? So it's really kind of nice to have it be summertime. I feel like a kid again a little bit. And I'm thinking about this poem by Mary Oliver, and I want to close with this. It's called The Summer Day, because I think she really does what artists are so good at, and that is taking everything we just thought through these last 30 minutes and put it into a mysterious, musical, evocative form that I just adore. So this is called The Summer Day by Mary Oliver. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean, the one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand, who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and then floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention and how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I have been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Thank you.